Welcome back to Therapy Tea. Today, we are sharing part 2 of our conversation with last week's guest. Woohoo!
If you have not already, please be sure to like and subscribe to our show on your preferred podcast listening app. Please also tell other people about our show. Share our episodes with your friends, your peers, your classmates, or anybody that you think might be interested. Just mentioning our show to someone else is really awesome for us to grow our audience. We really appreciate every like, follow, and share, email, all the things.
That's right. You can connect with us on social media or through our email. Our email is therapyteapod@gmail.com. You can send us questions, comments about the show, suggestions for future episodes. Maybe you want to be interviewed or you just want to say, hey, we love you. Whatever it is, we would love to hear from you. So please reach out.
Okay, back to the rest of our conversation from last week. What do you wish you had known before going into working with grief? I know you're really passionate about it, but what do you wish you had known going into just kind of full plunge into grief work specifically?
I love that question. And I think it challenges me too, having been in this world or realm for, years now, to go back there or to go back now to kind of what I would have shared. And I'm going to give a real, maybe simple answer to that because I think the answer is actually pretty simple, to me, at least having been an exposer around. And I think that me then, or like counselors just beginning or not, or anybody, people in the field now who have done grief counseling in a different way or still could benefit from knowing it's that. And I use the word simple and not maybe what it's taken to mean by like easy or not difficult, in that way. But when you realize kind of what it is or what people need and can benefit from focus wise for you in the room with them as a counselor, or also just as a human, I think it becomes easier to understand and easier to, quote unquote, tolerate or build a tolerance for. And so I think when it is just this looming darkness or entity that, you haven't touched because maybe you haven't experienced your own personal loss of any kind, death or existential, it becomes just what you make of it. It becomes this kind of floating, ambiguous, unknown foreign object. And then you experience it and, you have that immediate, direct, visceral experience, at least for clients or yourselves, and kind of come to a knowing about grief. Or, maybe you don't and you're still supporting people because I think you can do both. That's what I'm really passionate about. You don't have to break your leg to be a doctor who supports those who break their legs. You don't have to have the exact grief experience as your clients to be helpful, to be inquisitive and empathetic and seek understanding and tap into the understanding that you already might have for yourself. So I think when I'm trying to find the actual kind of response to the question as I go, but when you've experienced more relation to it or have accepted that we've pushed away closer into yourselves or into your kind of acceptance kind of realm, you learn that it isn't, and it is, this monstrous feeling or this unknowable feeling or unworkable kind of focus, but really that it is a human experience. It is actually the most natural experience that we will ever have and the most absolute experience, and known experience, and getting existential, one of our unchangeable, unfixable kind of conditions of life. And so it makes it, to me at least, less scary or less foreign to work with because I look at those in grief or experiencing grief and I see myself, I see, my friends, I see strangers, and it becomes more of an experience that is just something that we, are tasked with getting comfortable being with. And that makes it more simple. And I want to add a caveat to that. There are traumatic experiences of grief. There are traumatic death losses that, we don't foresee or code as normal or natural in the way that we would, quote unquote, just death and dying. So that adds a layer and an element to not be minimized. But I think being with those in grief is a lot simpler when it becomes that for whatever clinician or person, that they can tap into their own experience of life because of the death and grief response to it.
Jeez. Like,
She makes you
tearing
feel bad
up.
about your specialty, doesn't she? She makes you feel like, what am I doing with my specialty? It's like not even meaningful.
Stop.
I know, I was, like, sitting here, like, tearing up. I was like, yeah, like, death is like a connection with others. Jeez. Well, I mean, okay, but so we all just shared this beautiful moment. Thank you, Summer. But, like, it's so heavy. I don't know. Like, I know that, I deal with trauma. I work with actually quite a few people who have PTSD. Like, I work with parents who are just kind of like, "Meh, they're just a lot." But I I don't know. Like, death feels so much heavier and so much bigger. Do you ever struggle, or have you ever struggled maybe in this position to maybe not let the heaviness get to you? Maybe like when you're first starting out, and maybe how has that changed?
Yeah, that's a great question and certainly something to consider, be aware of. Yeah, I would say when I first began, the heaviness and the weight that I took on, with and from clients and myself and my responses to them was a lot. And to me at that time, and this is, just our own weaknesses exposed maybe, but I'm pretty open with that. I think I felt a sense of like martyrness or martyrship or however you
Mhm.
say that word. And I was like, no, this is my pain to bear. This is, I have to feel the full weight of what they're feeling to be helpful and to connect. And it's, if I'm not, I'm doing them a disservice, or I'm, feeling and minimizing kind of the weight that they're kind of experiencing. And so then everything was raw, everything was fresh. And I also just felt good about feeling it. I was like, this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to feel
Oh, yeah.
everything all the time. And also if I'm out of session and I'm not feeling it, am I a good counselor? Am I a good human, for having a moment of relief or joy, or when I know this is happening for them? And so in that introductory kind of to this experience, that's what felt right or authentic at that time, going into it brand new. And I'd say that has changed a lot over, years of being in this field, for good and just different reasons. That to me would not have been sustainable, in this field. And I think that translates, that feeling is just a counselor feeling. It's not unique to grief. I think that's what we feel working with children, working with anybody who's been abused, working with couples, we have them on our minds, our hearts, and we also are humans with emotions and are affected. But there comes a time that either you just have naturally or that you have to kind of work on to create more balance for your emotional attunement with and for clients in the room, but also especially out of the room. So I think doing heavy work, which can be heavy, you need to have balance. And I did not have that, as well at the beginning, and have worked a lot to create that intentionally. And it has also just come more naturally too, because of greater experience and kind of exposure to it all. So yeah, I would say it certainly was heavier for me at the beginning. And there are moments that kind of catch me off guard too, even still, where I'm just like, whoo, that was like a very heavy day, or sessions were heavy back to back to back, very traumatic, where I actually need to indulge a little bit in my sadness or in my kind of response or release for some of that. I'd say that doesn't happen as often, certainly. And I have a greater control where it passes sooner. But yeah, it still definitely happens because it is heavy work, or can be. But, and I'll shift maybe my response to and add before I do that. What I would say is a practical thing that's helped me tremendously, and maybe isn't something people choose and maybe isn't something I'll choose forever. But my job now is not directly, super close to me. So I drive to it about 40 minutes. I drive home about 40 to an hour. And that's really built-in time for me to prep for the day, to kind of wake up and not immediately jump into that, but to kind of breathe, put on music, put on a podcast, put on nothing, and get ready. This podcast would be a great plug for that time. Oh my goodness. And it has been. But yeah, so that morning kind of wind up and preparation. And then the drive home is such a time it is so transitional that, I'm not yet done with those feelings or the day. I'm still processing it and kind of releasing what I need to. or holding when I need to. But by the time, I'm home, I've closed the car door, I've finished my transition phase and can kind of jump back into my world and have that be a little bit more natural. And I'll add that question, I think, comes from anybody who hears that I do grief work. They're like, oh my gosh, that's so heavy. Like, why would you do that? Also, are you okay? Is something wrong? And I'm like, yes, maybe.
Some days, yes, I'm okay.
Great question. But grief work is surprisingly, and I tell this to anybody who'll listen, more various than just, and more dynamic and three-dimensional than just sadness or depression or darkness or heaviness. It is, if anybody has the capacity to feel that intensity of one emotion, so too, if we believe in like kind of the existential post-traumatic growth or just growth that comes with suffering or loss, so too they have the experience to experience that in, that different way of joy or lightness or humor. And I think people would think my sessions are interesting maybe if they were just outside the room hearing us giggle sometimes or laugh in huge, large ways, because they don't associate the two. If you're grieving, you can't be happy, you can't be sad, or you can't be humorous. You can only be one way if you're actually grieving. And it's like, no, like it's, a lot more dynamic than that and fluid too. So that helps too, the parts that aren't just one note, but are really, the full experience of it.
I love that. If you have the capacity to feel loss, then you also have the capacity to feel love. And you can't have one without the other. You wouldn't, like, if we always felt love, then we wouldn't know what love really was, because we would never feel loss.
Right.
One of the things you were saying, Summer, that I think is really interesting about your journey as a grief counselor. And I think all of us have done grief work to some degree, right? And you do often get the outsider's perspective of, oh my gosh, that's so heavy. How do you do that? Like, that's insane, or that's nuts, or that's too much. I don't know how that's possible. And what I liked what you were saying was, over time and with contact and with just connection to it, it's not that heavy, actually. It's more than that. And I was thinking, as you were talking about, the parallel to the actual experience of the person who is grieving.
Yeah.
Right? Like, they have this loved one that's died, and for them it's terrifying and scary and too big to navigate and so heavy. And what is cool to witness as a grief counselor, and that's part of what I keep coming back to camps for, is this way that you watch them connect with their grieving experience. And it's not that it's not as heavy anymore, it's that it's easier to carry. And it's different now. So just by connecting with it and over time allowing yourself to connect with it, to be exposed to it, it's still heavy, sure, but it's not that hard to carry anymore.
It's balanced.
Yeah, like the weight, I've adjusted to the weight of it, perhaps, is more what happens.
Yeah, that's a great capturing of all of this, and is something that I hold super true to all of this work, and which is kind of going back why I think it can be simple, or it can be shockingly, simple in that way. Because it is sometimes, I try to think about how do I explain what I do, because sometimes even I am like minimized. I'm like, well, what am I doing? I'm not, this large figure that can take away their grief. I'm not, and that's where I think, it feels such natural work for me because of my therapeutic approach, which is different, than sometimes working with somebody who's working on only anxiety or depression, or these focuses where counselors might approach it as, how do I reduce all these symptoms? How do I minimize, the experience of this and take away, or, they're really tasked with doing something with what's in front of them, or especially with pressure from insurance or guardians or, the client themselves. I want to make progress. I want to feel movement, away from this quote unquote problem. And with grief, clients have provided feedback, but this is also my natural belief that if you take that approach with somebody in grief, maybe it works for a second. Maybe they're like, oh yeah, I've ran past this and I'm like strong arming it, but you're going to come back to that beginning because you haven't actually sat with it. You haven't actually allowed it in. You've tried to bypass it.
Yeah.
And you might, create whatever version of yourself that can do that, quote unquote, but that can only last so long. And grief has a way of bringing you right back to the source if you have not given it, the attention that really it deserves and that would be honoring of its presence.
Yeah. It's like when you say it's shockingly simple, it's connect with it, right? Connect with it is the thing to do. And that's true as a grief counselor. Connect with grief, connect with your client's experience, and when you're the grieving person.
Yeah.
That's the thing that whenever I'm doing grief work, I want that person to just accept that you have to connect with it. And by connecting with it, it changes. It doesn't change the fact that the person that you love is dead. No.
Right.
But it changes your experiencing of it. It changes how you navigate it. And so the avoidance of the connection with it is what makes it so scary, or I don't want to approach it, or all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a saying, it's like, a known misery is easier than, I wish I knew that. I'll try to think about it. But basically, if we know what we're working with and we have touched it, made contact, it becomes less scary than what we've, created in our mind. We're working with fantasy or working with something that is not real. So how can we actually work with something that's not real enough to touch or enough to change or kind of be with? So yeah. And I mean, all to say, like, simple is not always easy. Like, that's not always the easy thing to
Totally.
do.
Right.
We want, the flashy treatment or the flashy interventions, and really like glamorize or kind of glorify some of that. And there's good reason for some of it. Some of it is flashy. I'm like, yeah, that's really cool. EMDR, that's the coolest. But when we go to that without giving the simple approach, it's, deserving time or focus. It's just a different result. It's just not always as helpful to jump to things before we've first began with acknowledgement that something is there and something is hurting. And it's not something that is external to you. It's not something that's like external to our community. It's something we really would do well with allowing in or acknowledging that it is a part of us. Because if I know that my grief is a part of me, as much as I don't want it, as much as I never did want it to occur or from the reason it did, I'm going to have different feelings toward a part of me versus a part of that's like attacking me and just external to me.
Yeah. I love what you also said way earlier in this conversation about how you early on in grad school, right, had that presentation that you were listening to where this person said, or maybe just talked about it this way, that grief work is not just about death loss, that everybody goes through grief or grieving experiences in their lifetime. And it's not always death loss. It could be any other kind of loss. And I love that. And I think that that's what makes grief work as a specialty actually something that every counselor should do to some degree, whether it's in their grad program or in their internship or whatever phase that you're in of your professional experience. Doing some kind of grief camp or grief counseling is so vital because everybody goes through loss and the grieving experience is the same. It's the same.
It's also easily generalizable to
Totally.
so many other things. Like,
Totally.
I cannot tell you how many times I have the conversation with clients about like, we just need to sit in this for like a while. We stop trying to make progress right now because it's not working. So we're just going to sit in this until it's not that scary.
Yeah. Yeah. When I work with clients who are going through divorce, and I'm constantly talking about the grieving experience and the phases of grief, and we're all going to use air quotes here, but it's so relatable in those moments. And I can't imagine doing the work that I do now without having had some complementary experience doing grief counseling work. Because it like you're saying, Jasmine, so generalizable to like all these things, all these other experiences that everybody goes through. It's universal. It is universal.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't think we're, taught or ingrained with that belief early on. It's something we come, older people, people who have lived longer years on this earth, I think have a very interesting relationship to grief or greater acceptance or greater awareness. Maybe not because they wanted it, but because, life has happened to them. And because it has, here is grief, here is more grief, here is grief, here is more and more. And so maybe they're more in touch versus when we're young or when we're growing, grief doesn't feel like something that is inherent to living and to kind of the tasks of life. It feels like something that, happens to other people or will happen when we're really old or only come from death. And so we don't prioritize the experience of it or honor that it is as integral to life as these milestones or, and it is kind of its own milestone time and time again.
Yeah. We don't normalize grief at all as a society. And that's a part of what makes it so monstrous, I think, to a lot of people. And I find that to be true when I'm interacting with maybe people who are not counselors or not, mental health professionals, and someone that they know has died. They're like calling me and saying, okay, so I know somebody that died and I don't know what to say to their family member. Karen, can you tell me what I should say? Like, because they don't know. And to me, it's like just so basic at this point. And I realize it's partly because I've been educated around it, but I think it's sad that we haven't normalized grief and what people need in grief. It's connection. We need to be together. We need to just sit with it.
Yeah, and invited to sit with it and allowed, because it is just not allowed. I'll say about just the focus of grief work with people, one of, if not, I would say, the biggest presenting concern or focus sometimes is how do we create a community of care outside of this session, this 1 hour a week, which hopefully does, something for them and, does for a lot, but it is so minimal. It is a moment of connection where maybe they're missing that particular type of moment in every other moment of their week, because family members, friends, caregivers just don't really know about how to be with grief or refuse to be with grief and minimize it.
It's seen as like non-functional. Like
Yes.
you're not, yeah, like you can't get anything done if you're just sitting grieving or like, and it's uncomfortable to be in it and be in a room with it. People wiggle like crazy when it's in the room. But if you were, that's fine, but maybe don't try to leave the room, wiggle within the room, right? Like,
yeah, risk some discomfort in a time where somebody is only feeling, discomfort. How loving is that?
Yeah.
So speaking of milestones, taking a hard right. Speaking of milestones, you mentioned milestones. We're talking about death, which is maybe the ultimate milestone.
I'm loving it. So intimate and deep and existential. This is my jam.
Same.
But Jasmine's going to take us a hard right. Where are we going, Jasmine?
But I want to know because Summer, I want to just like because you pretty recently got your license. We won't say like how because that's like the cultural thing in counseling. Like we won't say like, oh, how long have you been in practice, all that stuff. But like pretty recently you got your license. I'm wondering because our listeners are probably also wondering if they are also in school or if they are LPC associates, like what do you wish you had known before you made this big milestone and you got your full licensure and you dropped to that associate bit?
That's a great question. And yes, I have. I am now an LPC, licensed professional counselor. Woohoo! It actually happened. But yeah, I think there were so many, I would say, sub phases to this pursuit. There is undergrad, grad school, a whole grad program that for me was 3 years. And for some, I think the fastest was like 2.5 years maybe. And then the phase of within grad school. Okay, let me slow it down. Okay, I'm gonna slow it down because I'm giving it general and then I was gonna that, but I'll just start more detailed. Okay, so there was undergrad, of course, which is, your full bachelor's kind of timeline. For me, it was 3 years, for some less than that, more than that. And then grad school, which fastest, I think 2.5 years. For me, it was 3 years. And within grad school, you have your lecture-based courses. And so you have, I think the full program is 60 hours in total, which for a grad program, I didn't know this at the time, but learning because I've talked to people with MBAs or
It's a lot.
It's a lot. It's
A whole lot.
An average grad program is like 30 to 40 hours.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why everybody has like all these counselors out here. I used to feel bad about that. I used to be like, well, why, how do other people like who aren't counselors have multiple master's degrees?
Yeah.
It's because
That shit
a
is hat.
yeah, because all counseling programs are, or at least the one that we went to was like so intense, and other masters are half.
Yeah. It might be that K-CREP accreditation that actually
Yeah.
adds some hours. But I think actually it needs to be at least 60 hours.
Maybe longer with actual hands-on courses, like trauma. Trauma was not even a course when I think all of us were
Right.
there. And now it is. It's an
Yeah.
elective. Grief and
That's
loss
cool.
was not a required course. It's an elective. Substance abuse, I think, was required for the clinical mental health counseling track, but not for the licensed marriage and family therapist track. So I think there is room to add more,
Oh,
but
good. Let's make it longer.
yeah.
But don't give me a PhD. Just make it longer.
Not for us. We just 60 hours. Yeah, but I mean, honestly, I do think it should be, if it's longer, a PhD program. I think we go through something that feels very similar to, a fellowship or a residency or, whatever term that would be translatable to with the associate phase, but also the intern phase and all of that. And so certainly we're not doctors doing that type of work, but, we have invested a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of growth into this one moment becoming fully licensed. And then it's like, oh, but yeah, so going back there, grad school, you have your lecture courses, and then you have a semester of practicum where you're kind of beginning to, and even a few semesters for that where you're ready for the hands-on direct client focus and counseling. But you have your practicum, and then you have a year of internship. And is all of this paid like at all? No, it's all, volunteer. And some sites are, no site is the same as another. And so some you're working almost like full-time jobs. Some it's like a part-time job. Some is like hourly, just the moments where you're seeing clients. But it's intense. It was intense, that process. And I, was working also throughout that other, free labor. So balancing that was a lot. And then the associate phase for me lasted for 3 years. I took, I think I would say maybe a slower track. You have up until 5 years until you have to kind of renew or reapply if you haven't gotten, all of the hours it takes. And speaking of the hours, that is 1,500 indirect hours where you're doing kind of the non-direct counseling, and then 1,500 direct client counseling hours. And so it's a lot of time, and you're paying for a supervisor for all of those months. And it is, a true investment.
You got to keep track of every iota of time.
Yes. Yeah. And you're hustling. Yeah. So I deem my path the longer path because I'm not only working toward direct hours, but I'm doing all of these programming, coordinating, or events or administrative tasks, as well as just the direct counseling versus, other people are in group practice, private practice, or agencies where they are like pumping out the hours. And by pumping out, I mean like 50 client caseloads or 7 client caseload, and you're not seeing every single one in a week, but you're seeing as many as maybe possible. And there's biweekly clients and all of that. But yeah, I have a lot of friends who worked in agencies that were grueling, and they were completely burned out by the end or before the end, and they certainly met their hours as fast as you can, 18 months, but needed a recharge and a change in environment. So that met their needs for what it did. And that's great. And I'm sure they provided or know and believe they provided great care to the clients that, were fortunate to work with them. But that would not have been sustainable for me. I'm pretty highly sensitive in already, like kind of temperament, and that would have burnt me out. And I don't know that I would have continued if I would have taken that fast paced of a track. So to each their own. I think if you're hustling for what is only 18 months and you just got it like that, you go for it and you have, a great pursuit. But if you're maybe more sensitive or just don't operate that way, that's not a bad or good thing. That's just a you thing, and kind of figure out which track feels best for you. And both, are worthwhile, and, you don't lose credibility because you took a slower track or because you took a faster track. That's just what got you where you needed to go as soon as you needed.
Totally. So now that you are LPC only, anything you wish you had known before getting here? Like, do you feel different? Kind of like on your birthday, right? Do you feel any different?
Right. I'll say similar to my birthday. It's just a day that came. I'm not a birthday person. But yeah, I think the anticipation was a lot more motivating or rewarding than, the day it happened.
The actuality. Yeah.
Yeah. It's you log in and you check if the associate is still behind your name and it's gone and you're like, okay, cool, great, cool. And it's pretty anticlimactic. But
Right.
yeah, not counting hours, not viewing, a client missing their session as like, I got to redo my math. They're like, oh, I'm further off track. It's just mentally, it is this, I'm not going to compare it to grief, but it is, like a weight that has sitting with you your entire experience.
Yeah.
Because it's not yet complete. And if you have ADHD, and I have what I'd say undiagnosed, it's just this task that is looming and looming and looming. And the more you approach it, the more further away it feels, in the program, but then of course in your associate phase. So I think that just entity is no longer with me. And I have honored that it was there. I have thanked it for what it did for me. And I have released it to the abyss.
No, I hated every fucking second of that part of the associate process, having to constantly keep those stupid spreadsheets that were like really poorly designed spreadsheets. Let's be honest. Like they were very non-functional and I had to record every single thing. And I was like, this is the best day ever that I don't have to do this crap anymore. That was the worst part of the, for me,
Yeah.
associate experience. It's keeping track of every hour, having to erase and like what you said, the client doesn't show up. Now I've got to, that might add another week or whatever, potentially, or just something, I'm just done. I don't have to think about it that way anymore. It's great.
And then at the end, you just check a box and say,
you
did it.
I know. And then you get the form and it's just like, fill in the total number here. And it just basically needs to be 1,500. So like, what was I doing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they're like, did you do it? Yes or no? Just check yes or no. And then the next question is like,
hold up your Scout's honor, Scout's hand.
Do you swear?
Promise.
Swear you did it?
Yeah, that's right.
We're gonna be
No blinking.
unhappy if you say you did it and we figure out that you didn't.
That's right.
Yeah.
So stupid. Well, congratulations, Summer. We're so excited for you.
So much. Thank you.
So questions about, I don't know, resources and things. We always like to ask our guests about resources that maybe they would suggest for others. So what's one resource that was particularly influential to you or really resonates with your work or your experience that maybe another professional might want to engage with?
Yeah. So general influential moment was reading Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Super existential. And I think I gave it when I was like 18, 19, changed, my perspective of life at that point, reread it and learned, a different kind of version of what it had to share. But yeah, that was great, philosophical wise. Staring at the Sun by Yalom is a really great one for death anxiety and kind of bringing death contact closer. And it is, and I mean, I've done grief work for a little bit, but it talks more to the dying aspect, not as much the grieving.
The experience of dying.
Yes, and the fact of dying and our anxiety and pushing it away. And kind of, it is such a good book. That and Atul Gawande, I think it's called On Being, were two in the curriculum for my grief and loss course in grad school. So those were great. That came out of that. Those were great when it talks to dying and grieving a little bit, and just they were very collective and like systemic. So a take on our U.S. or larger, world's view of dying or grief. So those were helpful in that sense. What I'll scream at the top of my lungs and at any rooftop for grief focus is Devine, who is a grief specialist. I believe she's a social worker, but she has her own experience of, personal loss and grief, and also is a huge educator in the world and realm of grief. And so she, in general, is a great just person to learn from. And she has a book called It's Okay That You're Not Okay. And that book is a great introduction to grief, but also I would say flips grief on its head, or our society's kind of take on grief. It is, to me, the very opposite of toxic positivity. It calls out toxic positivity as it relates to grief, and she speaks like that too. And she's very crass at times and blunt, and that's also my appreciation about a grief focus, is that
This
we
is
can't.
great.
Yeah, yeah. So she's
Jasmine and I are also haters of toxic positivity.
Haters.
healthy hate. Yeah. But yeah, so there's that book. There is How to Carry What Can't Be Fixed, a grief journal by her as well. And I've actually used that in session with clients, sometimes just flipping through chapters because it comes as it comes.
Mhm.
But that is like, I would say, just so worth every dollar that contributes to it, because it is just so introspective and prompts clients with a lot of questions without leaving them to kind of figure out the answer. Like, it really provides a guide for some of this and a challenge for the moments that they can be with this experience, or a little bit deeper and deeper and deeper. But it is amazing. So if you're grieving as a human, I recommend it. If you are supporting someone in grief, I recommend it. If you're a counselor, especially supporting someone in grief, it is a great guide, because I think it is a super fair question of future clinicians or clinicians now to ask, like, okay, I'm starting to understand grief a little bit. I'm feeling more comfortable with it, but like, what do I do beyond acknowledge it? What are we doing? And are we moving toward anything, And if we are, how do we do that in a mindful way and gradual way, not like a rushed way? And so this, to me, provides a really great guideline to that. And no guideline is the one guideline and one and all, but at least framework to just start understanding, this process more. So that one. And then she has a podcast as well. It was called Hereafter, but I believe she changed it to just her book title, It's Okay That You're Not Okay. And then a great, if you're kind of on the social medias, Instagram, called Refuge in Grief. And working with grief, I'd recommend Worden's 4 Tasks of Mourning and/or Grieving. It's kind of been interchanged at times. That's also, just for counselors, a great model that is more up to date than what is now known as pretty outdated stages of grief. So that is something that came about because it was taken and applied to people who were dying, not people who were grieving. But because we didn't have much research at that time, it was kind of taken and transferred to also grief, and it is just very different. But yeah, I think those books, Rollo May, Yalom, Viktor Frankl, are kind of philosophers and just educators that have inspired me a lot. Megan Devine for the grief world.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Summer with the one resource. She's got it.
No. Okay, now for something a little bit more maybe fun. I don't know, but that was pretty fun. Deb, it's fun.
I think it's fun.
But maybe something a little bit more on the life side of death. What is like a book, movie, show, whatever, that like every human should watch? It's like summer's greatest hit.
The Thing.
The Thing. Like a movie everyone should watch, or a book everyone should read at least once. Like, what's your one thing?
You only get one here, Summer.
Only
Don't be breaking the
one?
rule again. Yeah.
Just for today. Just
Yeah.
what is it today? This is not a defining thing. Just what is it today?
Well, it's ironic because my fun things are also of this nature. So,
That's okay.
yeah.
Okay. That's okay.
Fun movie, Phantom of the Opera. I
Oh,
love
so good.
it.
Oh my God. The music of that. It's like, it hits me in the feels every single time.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen the show? Like the live show?
Mhm.
Fucking
Yeah.
A.
The chandelier.
I was sitting right underneath it. I was sitting right underneath, scared the shit out of me. It was amazing. Such a good one.
Good resource. Yeah.
Agreed.
Or good movie. All right. Anything that you might want to plug for yourself? Like,
Yeah, I think our camps. So we have our camps, and so it's Hope Hospice Grief Center, and so that's posted on Facebook and our website. But we do family camp, youth camp, and then a smaller youth camp throughout the year, every year. And so those are free or offered at no cost to the community, thanks to our generous donations and grantors. So those are just a really great resource, and that's where you might find somebody else in here. So
I love the camps.
They're
I
amazing.
will go to the camps forever if I can, because I guess when you plug this, hopefully you're plugging this like for families and kids and all of that,
uh-huh.
but also for professionals to
Yes,
volunteer,
thank you. Yeah, take that.
right? And not just professionals. I would love to see more like community,
Yes.
non-professional volunteers at these camps, because this is one of the most rewarding experiences that you can ever have. And you will love it. Every camp that it's their first time, at the end of the camp, we do our little wrap up and everybody's like, oh my gosh, this was the most amazing experience. And so just know that if you're nervous, you'll love it. You'll end up like really being so rewarded, and yeah, it's awesome. It's
And
something to do.
the food is normally like pretty
Food
good,
is
you know?
pretty
Like
good.
there's like food, there's really cool people. You're gonna feel like you don't know what you're doing. Karen's partner is there sometimes, and he's a total trip. Like, so you're
Yeah,
and he's not a counselor. So
not a
like
counselor.
you're gonna love it. There's counselors, there's not counselors. Everyone should do this at least once. If you need to check that grief box, like everyone should do this at least once. I'm happy
Totally.
to play this.
Yeah.
Totally. Love it. Well, thank you so much, Summer. Thank you for coming. Thanks for making time out of your day.
Thank y'all for having me. I wish we could do this forever. Let's just keep on going and going and going. But I
Yeah.
appreciate it. And I really just have to say, I really just so value what you guys are setting out to do with all of this and have already begun. Because I'll have to say, I listened to the first episode, y'all's, brand new to this realm episode. And the whole time I was like with y'all didn't know it, but I was like, yes, that, yeah, oh gosh, that too, that, oh my gosh, I wish I would, and I was just, as a fellow counselor, we're right there with you. And so this is such reflective and relatable content. So I appreciate it. And I think I would have adored it before I knew I needed it or could have related to it.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thanks for saying that. And you have been one of our listeners from the very beginning, and we so appreciate you.
Thank you guys.
Thank you. Thanks again.